Happy Thursday, everybody. This is Rob Mazak. I am a psychic medium, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my story and some of the experiences that I've had along the way that have brought me from then to now. And I have a lot of really cool services now that I provide through business as a professional intuitive for a soft title, if you will. And some of the services that I have are really, really cool. And I've really just learned to listen to the guidance I've gotten from my spirit guides, the other side, and however you'd like to look at that. And gone on and learned to trust in, just blind faith, just moving in the direction that I've been given to take. And at first it wasn't all that easy, of course. Trusting what you get is probably the hardest thing. But some of the services that I have are very, very cool. And I can take credit for putting the work in to learn and becoming as good as I am with those things. But I can't take the credit for the direction that I was turned towards or given. That information came from outside of myself as I see it. So some of the services that I have are really, really awesome, like I talk about. And so I am a psychic, which to me means that I can connect with the person where they are now and understand the energy of their body, what's going on in their life, with very few words being exchanged. Actually, there's a lot of things that speak about the person. Simply connecting with their energy just really, it's like reading a book. And not only can we figure out what's going on in their life now and talk about that, but we can also kind of look at what might come along in the future. Because I don't necessarily believe that the future is written in stone, pre-programmed or predicted, step by step, word by word, action by action. But I do think, though, that when you're working with somebody as a psychic, you can usually see what's going to happen in this person's life if nothing changes that they're doing currently. In other words, if they don't change something, this is likely to be their path and what may happen. Some people look at that as seeing the future. I'm not sure that seeing the future is what it's all about. I think it's seeing the future of the person if they continue doing the same habits, the same things, and they don't make a change. And so that's how I look at that. And I also don't necessarily like to completely give 100% of the future that I see, per se, or the future is probably the best way to put that. Because I also don't want to instill a belief in them that what I'm seeing is actually going to happen. Because if I instill a belief in them and they believe that much in me, they will likely to have that outcome, whether that was supposed to happen or not. I learned that from a client, actually. That's kind of cool. I didn't come up with that myself. I can't credit myself with that, but we learn from everybody, right? And so that's how I approach being a psychic. I mean, everybody has their own idea about it. Many people think they can just sit in front of you and you can tell them everything about them like we're God. It doesn't necessarily work that way. Yeah, I've had some clients that have done that. I'm like, no, you got to give me a little something to work on because, you're paying me for my time and it might take me a little longer to get there if I'm doing it on my own intuition. Not impossible, very likely, but if you just, spit out the information you're looking for and get a little background, boom, we can connect and get to the business, right? But being a medium is a little different than that. Most people will tell you that a psychic is not always a medium or necessarily a medium, but all mediums are psychics. So for me, being a medium is like being connected to the medium. I also learned that from a student. That definition just fits so well. Being connected with everything there is, the universal cosmos or consciousness or however you want to look at that, just the database of everything. And when somebody comes in and talks about wanting to connect with Aunt Susie or Uncle Joe or whatever, it's there's a couple of facets there, right? And so the energy of of them talking about that, writing it down, saying it, sending a text, whatever, it just creates that quantum connection for me. And I'm able to connect with the person, if you will, or at least the energy of that person that they've left here, or left with the client, or left in the cosmic consciousness, as we talked about. And it may very well be that I'm really talking to people that are on the other side that are dead. There's no way to prove that per se. Even if you get absolutely accurate information, which most of the time I do, it still doesn't really prove that there's a deceased loved one over there talking to us. So it doesn't matter to me, to be honest. It just matters that you're able to help the client, and that you're able to show that you are connecting to the likeness of the person that they're trying to connect with, and it makes sense to them, and that the information you're getting from this connection is something you should know. How do you know that? And it's helping them with whatever questions they have or resolution they need. It's cool, right? It's okay. So I'm not really worried about where the information comes from. It's just that it helps the client. And that's my whole goal. And so being a psychic medium is really, really, really fun. And then, but the very first calling I got was to learn how to do Reiki. I remember just very distinctly along my initial path as I was learning to meditate, not long after I met my current wife. I was really good at meditation by then. I got this direct message, in an awakened state, actually just walking around at work, I think. It just came in as clear as a bell. It said, you need to learn how to do Reiki. And that sounds like, hocus pocus, but I'd never even heard of Reiki at that point. I didn't know what that was. No idea. I had to go on the internet and search it up. I had no clue. I just went on blind faith, like we talked about earlier, and I took, level 1, level 2, Reiki Master, just went all the way in. Began to learn how to use Reiki, and further message on that as I was learning it, and just couldn't understand how to explain it to a client, and being very unhappy with that. My spirit guide at the time was basically told me that I just needed to talk my way through it, and this would help the client, and it would help me learn the energy of the body. And 7 or 8 years later, whatever it is, yes, the body just absolutely screams at me now. And it's so clever, if you will, how easy it is to understand somebody just by putting your hands on somebody, or near them, or above them, or around them, getting into their space, which can go out as much as 12 feet or so, right? And so Reiki is really, really cool. It is, to me, the basis of developing your other gifts, because once I was attuned to Reiki and started using that and connecting, oh my gosh, every gift that I have now and had previous to that, it just accentuated beyond belief. And that's where I really learned that I was like a psychic and a medium, right? And the first time my Reiki master put his hands over me, over my third eye, I believe, I saw one of his past lives and the person that he was going to meet in this life. And what was really cool is, since he had done regressions before, it resonated with him. He said that's pretty doggone accurate. I was like, what the heck is what is this? And so I've taken that to a whole new level, obviously. And then after Reiki for a while, then I got that new direct message from my spirit guides. Said, you need to learn hypnosis. It's funny. I say I hear it. So let me quantify what hearing means. Hearing to me means it's like a thought in my head that doesn't feel like one I generated. It's not like I'm hearing it with my physical ears. Everything that I do happens in my mind's eye, if you will. I don't see spirits like in front of me or around me or at night staring at me at the end of the bed. None of that stuff happens. It just happens within my own consciousness. That's how I hear messages. And if I'm talking to a deceased loved one or a deceased person or somebody that's on the other side, is a lot of times it's like a telepathy, if you will, like a thought transference. But I can tell the difference between my thoughts and thoughts that are originating from outside of myself. So I heard about hypnosis. I got on the internet. The internet's a wonderful thing, apparently. And the first thing the first thing that the Google popped up for me was quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is, or has been developed by Dolores Cannon, who's no longer with us. I think she passed in 2014, but her daughter continues, and it is one of the most amazing tools that I have in my arsenal, if you will. It is so cool. So there's a facet of past life regression in that, on our way down to connecting with the theta level of consciousness, which means we turn off our conscious mind, Mr. and Mrs. Stupid, and use our subconscious to connect to all there is, all there was, and all there shall be, right? And in just getting straight answers from the source, and in getting healing and all these things, it is such a phenomenal and wonderful and fun modality to do. And so I guess that wasn't enough. And so I was also then informed that I needed to break out the past life regression part and do it separately. And so I began doing that as a separate modality, even though it's part of the hypnosis. And I did learn a hard lesson there at one point. I was doing just a regression, which should be like a light trance where you don't necessarily go all the way under. And I had this one client one day, and I allowed her friend to be in the room with us. It's a good thing. And I went through a whole hour, went through several lives with this person. And when I brought them back around, if you will, they didn't remember any of it. They went all the way down to the theta level of consciousness. So I had to remember a whole hour. So hard lesson, I learned to record everything. Use an audio recorder, which I do for hypnosis anyway, but now I do it for regressions and a lot of times for regular readings. And so I also was given a directive to eventually, at some point, I was told to go work out of a spiritual store. And then the owners had tried to get me there for a while. I was on a COVID mission for a while, and I kept pushing back, and I was making tons of money. Finally, that got taken out of my life, and so they said, "Oh, guess what?" My spirit guides, that is, you can go there now. And so I did, and I tell you, I've never really did psychic and mediumship readings like face-to-face across the table, somebody wanting instant answers, results, as they're staring at you. That seemed a little intimidating to me. But I used to do it where somebody would just give me the information, say, "Hey, I want to connect with so-and-so," or whatever. And so I would go home and meditate and get the answers and either, call them up and tell them what I got, or most of the time I would send them an email and just, and tell them what came through. And that worked really well. It was pretty accurate as well. But apparently it was not my entire mission. I was told that I needed to go to the store and work out of that store, and I would be forced to begin doing this face-to-face as people walk in, perfect strangers, on the spot. And let me tell you, it was, the first time I ever did it, it was very scary, because I wasn't, even though I was sure I was accurate, because I've been accurate, but, what's going to happen when somebody's sitting in front of me? And the first time I did one, it came out the same. It actually came out much better, because by that time I'd been really good at understanding body language and the body and the energy, and I developed my psychic skills and mediumship skills, even it was in the closet. It just added to the package. I mean, it became so much better doing it in person. And so there was that. And while I was at the store, I had taken some time to learn, the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, to read cards, but I didn't have the confidence in my knowledge of the cards to do readings once again face to face right in front of somebody. I might do it for practice. However, that also got kind of pushed into my direction. It wasn't a direct message from my spirit guides. It was more of an indirect. I found myself being the only practitioner in the store on many occasions, and clients would come in and ask, "Do you read the cards? Do you do the cards? Do you do the cards?" I kept saying, "No, I don't. I don't." Finally, after I don't know, 50 times of being asked that question, I heard that little voice, "Yes, you do." So that's what I said to the client. I said, "Sure, I do cards. Come on in," right? And the funny thing is, it turned out wonderful. It was absolutely amazing. My style of reading cards might be a little bit different than other people, right? I've also developed a lot of good life coaching skills along the way. I did take some formal classes in that. But life coaching is part of everything I do. Everything I do, I'm trying to offer different or alternative ways of looking at their situations. Look at this side of the coin, that side of the coin. What about this? I always want somebody to walk out with some kind of tool, some kind of idea, some kind of different direction, different way of thinking. I never tell people what to do, but what I want to do is give them enough information and assistance to see things in different ways so that they can make their own informed decision, which is really cool. I know there's a lot of readers out there that are very direct and say, well, the cards say you need to get divorced. Well, I would never tell anybody that. I might suggest that their relationship may not be the right thing, but they have to make that choice themselves. And then along the way, my mentor, who was absolutely wonderful, she strongly suggested that I become an ordained minister, a legal one, not go to seminary per se. And I just flat out asked her, well, what's the point of becoming a minister? And she told me, well, there's a few things, right? It gives you a little more legal protection. It also gives you all the same rights as somebody that went to seminary. Marry people, all the different things that ministers, pastors do, you're legally allowed to do. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. She said, but the other thing is, not everybody that you want to help will understand the metaphysical. You can word it in such a way that it's a spiritual answer, a spiritual quest, a spiritual direction, spiritual information. And everybody knows what a minister is. Everybody knows what somebody that has been ordained does, or at least they have their idea. If you walk into a hospital and you want to visit with patients that might need your help, like, energy work with Reiki or helping them with whatever services you have. I'm a psychic and I'm a medium. They're going to turn you right around, right? If you go up to the same hospital and say, hey, I got some time during my week. I'd like to sit with some patients, that are here, and maybe some of the families, and, I'm a reverend. I would like to help out. You're going to be a lot more welcome. And that has been really amazing too. I've only married one person, but it is a really awesome idea. I am actually on the board for the organization that I became ordained through. So everything's kind of coming around full circle. Anyway, so those are kind of, I do other things. I'm a physical fitness trainer, right? And I do sports taping and some, normal things, if you will. And with the goal of our business to take care of or address everything that we can at any level of the human that's walking in our clinic or our office, right? And it could be it could be an animal as well. I've never really gotten into pet psychic stuff, although they do speak very loudly, actually. I got a friend of mine that's really, really good at it. But anyway, so my journey really started, completely wholeheartedly started when I was at the end of my first marriage, which was very, very long, 26 years of marriage, and it just suddenly came to an end. And I say suddenly, it was more suddenly for me. I mean, I wasn't very obvious, or I was more oblivious about things, and then so it seemed like suddenly to me, although it had probably been dying for a while, if you will. Anyway, it woke my little butt up. I went originally after working on myself to save the marriage, as guys, we like to save the marriage. Mr. Fix-It, as they call us, right? It wasn't long, a couple weeks into it, that I realized it was more about saving me. And in this space and in this desperation to make me a better human being, I dug into meditation like nobody's business. Nobody taught me how to do it. I just learned how to do it, and tried different ways, and basically settled on listening to non-specific music for 20 minutes at a time originally. And, now I can meditate, anywhere, standing up in the bus station, laying on the bed, walking, running, sitting quietly, staring at a candle, whatever. It's like a muscle, right, that you learn to use. And, you can exercise that muscle anywhere now, or at least I can. Not only did I learn to meditate, but I learned to connect to the spiritual realm. We'll just use that term. And in that connection, I through dreams and meditation, I learned who my primary spirit guide was at the time. Was my sister, who had passed at a young age. I learned to work with her, and it was, and still is, quite amazing. She's not necessarily my primary spirit guide anymore. However, the information and the answers and the direct messages about where I needed to go, what I needed to do, what I needed to work on, what part of me needed work, was very, very helpful. And it's very painful, of course, when you're working on yourself, to hear anybody, whether it's a spirit guide or your friend or your family, just tell you that you're just being an idiot, and this is you haven't had it together all these years, even though you thought you did. You've been a classic man, made all the classic man mistakes. I really, really became such a better product. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm 100% there, but I'm a far better version than I was before. And the beauty of having worked on yourself and gone through these painful processes, which is really one of the best times of my life, the worst times, but the best times, is that now I can no longer ignore when I can see it happening now. I can see when I'm being stupid. And I can no longer say I don't know, because I do know. And I have to be just as hard on myself as I do with any of my clients or anybody else. I have to shoot straight with myself. And that is actually pretty hard to do. Once you learn to accept that you need to be your own savior, your own healer, your own doctor, your own physician, your own whatever, then it becomes a much easier process. And once you learn to accept that. So here I am, right? I am now doing all these really cool and wonderful things, and the amount of information I've gotten through meditative journeys is just impressive. I've been places, I've seen things, I've learned things that I can later validate, but things that there's no way that I could ever learn in our known reality by sitting, on the floor cross-legged, or laying on my bed meditating, or whatever, going outside of myself and looking around and seeing things. Most people would think you're nuts. Well, maybe we are. I don't know. But the thing is that once you learn to get into that space, it is so amazing, the places you will go. And many people have tried to convince me to do like plant medicine and all this stuff, and the journeys are so amazing. And when they describe what's happened to them, where they've gone and what they've learned and all the experiences they've had, I'm like, after all these years of meditation, I get the same thing without having to use any external thing. I'm not downgrading plant medicine use. I'm saying it's not for me, but that's okay. But I did want to talk about probably the most grand vision I've ever had to this day that I can think of. It did happen within about 5 days of meeting my current wife. And I was working, at a hospital back then, and she was coming in as, she was around there periodically as a student. I remember we had breakfast and lunch that day. And then for some reason I started thinking about her son, which she had mentioned to me that she had. I'd never met him. I knew his name, his first name, rather. That's all I knew. So I don't even think I'd seen a picture of him by then. I just knew that he existed. And I remember going down the hallway at work, and he started coming into my mind with his name and and all this stuff, and it wouldn't go away. I just kept thinking about this little boy, and I was getting this image in my mind of this boy, later finding out that it was exactly who, this boy was, right? It just got more and more intense, and I just reread it because sometimes the details get lost over the years. I remember though that I was completely lit up, is what I call it. My whole body was tingling from top to bottom, and it wouldn't stop. It kept getting more and more intense, and it got to the point where I just, the emotions in me just wouldn't stop raising or rising or getting more intense. And so I finally had to leave work. And I did mention it to my wife before I left, that I'm going to have to sit with this because I don't understand what's happening. Sit and meditate. As I was driving home, this boy that was coming through in this vision was not going to wait for me to get home to meditate. It happened on the way home, and I was just like streaming in tears, and the emotions were just incredible. And this boy came through with 2 large angels on either side of him. And I remember looking at this little boy's eyes, and he had the same exact look as his mother, the same intense eyes and the same look, same smile. And there's many messages that came through in that particular thing. And one of the things today, to this date, that I have not figured out yet, even though I've sought the answer through meditation, through other readers, it just hasn't come through. Because I remember this little boy reaching into his right front pocket, pulling something out and showing it to me. And I couldn't quite tell what it was. It fit in his palm of his hand. It was a little shiny. But he said that his mother would understand what that meant. And of course, she doesn't. It doesn't not ring a bell. But one thing I've learned, I'll come back and finish the story, but one thing I've learned over time is that time in the spiritual realm is non-existent. Time doesn't exist. So when you get information, sometimes you won't get the clarification, validation, or answer, or why you've gotten it for years sometimes. So I hang on to every bit of information I get, and it all eventually comes around and validates itself. This one hasn't yet, and it's been 9 years plus. So I'm not sure when that's going to, become validated or valid. However, I'm still waiting on that, and I'm sure it'll show up. I remember though that even when I got home, that I literally was completely an emotional wreck, if you will. And in the writings that I have in my journal about that, I wrote that, God only gives us what we can handle. And, most of the time it's in little spoonfuls, because giving you the whole shovel would overwhelm you and may not even survive it, because the expanse of this universe is amazing, right? And everything that's in it, we can only see like maybe less than 1% of all that's possible. And we think that's a lot. But I remember writing, God or the source must have known that I was ready to receive this kind of information in such large quantities. And I was just completely drained. I remember, going to sleep. I didn't meditate after that. I was just done. My dogs were worried about me. But it was so amazing to meet her son before I met her son for real. And when I did meet him, it was exactly how I saw this little boy in this vision. And it's just blew my mind, and it's just added on to all the validation that had gotten up to that point from all my personal journey. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to touch on who I am and where I'm coming from and how I got here. I mean, there's a lot more of my history that kind of adds into it, but this is something that's always been with me, always been on the forefront. I look back and I realized that I knew how to meditate and do telepathy and telekinesis and all these things long ago. And I've scared myself with it and put it away many times, but it's always been there. But sometimes life gets in the way. Military, kids, jobs, money problems, relationship problems, all these things will get in our way. But you got to remember, people, always find time for yourself, for what it is that you are on this earth to do. Remember that even in relationships, that each person is still an individual and they still have individual purposes. Yes, together there's a purpose, but there's also a separate purpose. Don't lose yourself for anyone or anything, is my suggestion, right? Remember who you are. Remember why you're here. And if you don't know, seek it out. Learn to meditate. Learn to connect. You will get the answers. Learn to accept them. Learn to trust them. Roll with them. And you will find yourself in some amazing places. Anyway, I shall digress, as I like to say. And we'll finish here. But I would really like to hear your story. I would really love to hear your stories. And it is really cool to learn about people and how they got where they are and where they would like to go. But you can find my contact information on my website at lifebymazak.com. That's LIFEBYMAZAK.com. And I would, like I said, love to hear from you, and you will be hearing from me again. Stay strong and live your life.